The bell rang, signaling the start of another school day. Ethan walked into the hallways of his new school, feeling as though every eye in the hallway was on him. His oversized jacket hung loosely over his thin frame, and his sneakers, which were a size too big, slapped against the cold tile floor. He wasn't a particularly tall boy, nor was he one who stood out in any way. He wasn't the athletic type, nor did he have a group of friends to sit with during lunch. No, Ethan was different from the others, and he could feel it. As he walked down the hallway, his heart pounded. The whispers followed him, cutting through the noise of the other students. He couldn't help but notice how the popular kids gathered around, laughing and talking loudly. He tried his best to ignore them, but it was hard. It always felt like they were all staring at him, waiting for him to mess up, waiting for him to be something he wasn't. "Hey, look at this," one of the boys shouted from the group, pointing toward Ethan. The group of kids snickered, and Ethan's face turned bright red. He didn't know what to do. It had been the same every day since he transferred here. At his old school, things had been different. Sure, he wasn't the most popular kid, but at least he wasn't the target for teasing. But here was different. Look at the jacket. It's like he's trying to hide his body or something. One of the girls laughed, her voice cutting through the air. The laughter echoed in Ethan's ears, and he kept his head down. Every step felt like it took all the strength he could muster. The words stung, but he had learned long ago to keep quiet. If he didn't respond, maybe they'd lose interest. Maybe they'd move on to someone else. But it didn't work. Not here. As he turned the corner to his next class, Ethan saw a group of boys standing by the lockers, joking around. He hoped they wouldn't notice him. But of course they did. "Hey, weakling," one of the boys called out. Ethan felt his heart race. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at home, playing with dolls or something?" The boys laughed loudly, and Ethan just kept walking, his face burning. His heart was pounding in his chest. His jacket felt too heavy, like it was suffocating him. But he didn't stop. He never stopped. He had learned that if you didn't show them how much their words hurt, they would eventually get bored. They would move on to someone else. At least, that's what he told himself. By the time Ethan reached the classroom, he was already exhausted. It wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was emotional. The teasing, the laughter, the whispers, they drained him. He sat at his desk, barely noticing the students around him. He could feel their eyes on him as he sat down, their stares sharp and filled with judgment. He just wanted the day to end. The teacher walked into the room, and the students fell silent, but the air felt thick. Ethan could tell that the room was still buzzing with energy from the teasing. He wished it would stop. He wished they could see him for who he really was, but he didn't know how to make them see it. How could they see him when they already had a picture of him in their minds? The weak kid, the kid with the oversized jacket and the clumsy way of walking, the kid who didn't fit in. As the teacher started the lesson, Ethan tried to focus. He tried to pay attention to the math problems on the board, but his mind kept wandering. The teasing was always there, just beneath the surface, like a shadow that followed him wherever he went. He glanced around the room and saw Tyler, the popular kid, smirking at him from the back of the room. Tyler was the kind of kid who had it all: good looks, athletic ability, and friends who would do anything to be around him. Tyler had always been at the center of attention, and now it seemed like he was making it his mission to make Ethan's life miserable. Tyler's smirk deepened as their eyes met, and Ethan quickly looked away. He couldn't stand the feeling of being invisible, and yet somehow still being the target of attention. How was it that he could walk into a room and feel both invisible and entirely in the spotlight at the same time? It didn't make sense, but it was his reality. The bell rang again, signaling the end of the class, and the students rushed out of the room, eager to get to their next class. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He should have felt relieved, but instead, he felt more defeated than ever. He had gotten through the day, but at what cost? His self-esteem felt shattered, and his mind was spinning with all the ways he had been humiliated. As he walked through the hallway toward his next class, he could already feel the whispers following him. The laughter, the mockery. It never stopped. He couldn't escape it, no matter how hard he tried. But then, just as he reached the door to his next class, he noticed something different. There was a new student standing in the doorway. Ethan had never seen him before. The new kid was tall, with a quiet demeanor. He looked out of place, but there was something about him that stood apart from everyone else. He didn't have that look of arrogance that the other popular kids did. He wasn't trying to fit in or impress anyone. Ethan didn't know it yet, but this new kid was about to change everything. The day carried on like any other. The bell rang, signaling the start of the next class. Ethan slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked toward his next classroom, his footsteps slow and heavy. His mind replayed the same moments, the laughter, the taunting and the cruel remarks that seemed to follow him wherever he went. He had barely spoken to anyone all day, except for the occasional greeting from the teacher or a whisper from the group of kids who made fun of him. He didn't know why he bothered coming to school anymore. Every day felt like a battle he was losing. But today, something was different. Something felt strange in the air. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he could sense that change was coming. As Ethan made his way down the hallway, he noticed the usual group of students hanging around their lockers. Tyler and his friends were there, their laughter filling the space. But there was something else, something new. The hallway seemed quieter today, less filled with the usual noise. As he walked past them, Ethan's eyes caught sight of a figure standing near the entrance to the classroom. A new kid. He wasn't tall, but there was something about him that stood out. He wasn't wearing the school's standard uniform, but he wasn't wearing something outrageous either. He was dressed casually in a simple t-shirt and jeans, but there was something in his posture, a quiet confidence, that made him stand apart. Ethan couldn't help but wonder who this new kid was. The boy had short, dark hair, and his eyes seemed to survey the room, taking everything in without saying a word. Ethan couldn't help but be drawn to him. There was something calm about him, something different from the rest of the students. As Ethan entered the classroom, he saw that the new kid was sitting in the seat next to him. His presence was strangely comforting, almost like a quiet reassurance that for some reason, everything would be okay. But Ethan couldn't shake off the feeling that something would happen. It was as if the calmness in the air was a prelude to something big. The teacher began the lesson, but Ethan found it hard to concentrate. His mind kept wandering to the new kid. Who was he? Where did he come from? Was he going to be another target for Tyler and his gang? Ethan quickly dismissed the thought. He couldn't imagine anyone standing up to Tyler, the class's biggest bully. Everyone just seemed to give in to him, afraid to speak up. Suddenly, Tyler's voice cut through the silence, and everyone turned their attention toward him. Tyler stood up from his desk and walked over to the new kid with a grin on his face. Ethan could feel his heart race. He had seen this before. Tyler had picked a target, and now the teasing was about to begin. Well, Tyler said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Looks like we've got a new kid in town. What's your name, huh? The new kid looked up slowly, his face expressionless. There was no nervousness, no sign of discomfort. He simply met Tyler's gaze and said, Lucas. Lucas, huh? Tyler repeated, turning to his friends and giving them a sly grin. Well, Lucas, you sure look like a guy who could use some help fitting in. I mean, look at you. You don't exactly look like one of us. The rest of the class watched, waiting for the new kid to say something. Ethan couldn't help but feel a little sorry for Lucas. He had no idea what he was walking into. He had no idea what it was like to be the target of Tyler's mockery. But when Lucas spoke, Ethan's jaw dropped. I'm not here to fit in, Lucas said calmly, his voice steady and composed. I'm here to be myself. Tyler's smirk faltered, and for a brief moment, the room fell silent. Ethan could feel the tension in the air. He knew Tyler wasn't used to someone talking back to him like that. The class waited, wondering what would happen next. "Really?" Tyler said, taking a step closer to Lucas. "Well, if that's the case, you're gonna have a real hard time around here. We like to have fun with the new kids. You better watch your back." Lucas didn't flinch. He didn't back down. He simply looked at Tyler with a calm expression, his eyes filled with something that Tyler couldn't understand. "I'll be fine," Lucas replied, his tone unwavering. "You don't scare me." The class exchanged glances, unsure of what to think. Tyler, who usually dominated every situation with his confidence and sarcasm, seemed unsettled. Lucas's quiet words had thrown him off. Tyler, clearly frustrated, turned away from Lucas and walked back to his desk. "Whatever, man," he muttered, sitting down with a huff. Ethan sat in his seat, staring at Lucas. Something about the way Lucas had handled Tyler's bullying intrigued him. Most kids, including himself, would have been nervous, even terrified in a situation like that. But Lucas had stayed calm. He hadn't raised his voice or tried to prove himself. He had just been himself. And somehow, that had been enough to send Tyler, the biggest bully in the school, retreating. As the class continued, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Lucas. He had seen how the new kid handled the situation, and it made him wonder, could he do the same? Could he stand up to Tyler, or was he forever destined to remain the quiet, invisible boy in the background? Lucas didn't seem like a superhero or a warrior, yet somehow he had the courage to stand his ground when everyone else would have backed down. The bell rang, and the students filed out of the classroom. As Ethan walked out, he couldn't help but glance over at Lucas. The new kid was already gathering his things, seemingly unaffected by what had just happened. Ethan wondered if Lucas even realized how much of an impact he had just made. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. The next few days felt like a slow build-up to something inevitable. Ethan found himself observing Lucas more and more, intrigued by his calm demeanor and confident attitude. There was something magnetic about him, something that set him apart from everyone else. It wasn't just the way he dressed, or the way he carried himself. It was the way he seemed completely unbothered by the things that bothered everyone else. He was different, and that difference was starting to make Ethan feel like maybe there was hope for him too. But as much as Ethan admired Lucas, he couldn't help but notice how the other kids were starting to react. Tyler and his gang weren't giving up. They had clearly marked Lucas as the new target, the next person they were going to break down, just like they had done with everyone else. But Lucas, in his usual fashion, didn't seem to care. He walked through the hallways, head held high, completely undeterred by the whispers or the stares. One afternoon, as Ethan was walking to his next class, he saw Tyler approach Lucas again, this time with a group of his friends. Ethan had a bad feeling about this. It was the kind of feeling that told him something was about to go down. Something big. Tyler walked up to Lucas and put a hand on his shoulder, as if to claim him as his new target. "Well, Lucas," Tyler said with that familiar smirk. "You think you can just walk in here, act all high and mighty, and not have to prove yourself? You think you're better than us?" Lucas looked at him, unfazed, and said simply, "I never said that. I just don't have time for your games." Tyler's face twisted with annoyance. "You're really starting to annoy me, man. You think you're better than everyone. You think you can just waltz in here and ignore the rules. I'm the one who decides who fits in, not you." Lucas didn't flinch. He just stared back at Tyler with a calm, unwavering gaze. "I'm not here to fit in. I'm here to be myself," he replied, his voice quiet but firm. The group of kids behind Tyler laughed, as if this was some big joke. They had seen it all before. The new kid who thought he could stand up to Tyler. They all knew how it ended. It always ended the same way, with the new kid backing down, submitting to Tyler's power. But Lucas didn't back down. Tyler's smirk faded into a hard frown. "You want to see how this works around here," he said, stepping forward. "You want to see what happens when you don't know your place." Ethan watched from a distance, his heart pounding in his chest. He had seen Tyler do this before, push someone to the edge, and then watch them break. He knew what would happen next. Tyler would humiliate Lucas, just like he had done to everyone else. He would make him feel small, insignificant. But Lucas wasn't like the others. He wasn't cowering in fear. He was standing his ground. Tyler's eyes narrowed, and in that moment, Ethan knew the bullying wasn't going to stop. Tyler was about to push Lucas to his limits, but Lucas wasn't backing down. Something inside him had shifted, and it was as if the world had just paused. "Come on, let's take this outside," Tyler said, motioning for Lucas to follow him. The group of students behind Tyler laughed again, whispering to one another. Ethan, still standing a few feet away, didn't know what to do. Part of him wanted to speak up, to stop this madness, but another part of him was frozen, unsure of what was going to happen next. Reluctantly, he followed them outside. The school courtyard was nearly empty. It was the perfect place for something like this to unfold. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the concrete. The air felt tense, thick with anticipation. Ethan stood a few feet behind the group, unsure if he should intervene or just keep watching. Tyler and Lucas were facing off now, standing several feet apart. The crowd had gathered around them, eagerly waiting to see what would happen. Tyler's group of friends stood behind him, egging him on. They all wanted to see the same thing. They wanted to see Lucas break. "You think you're different, huh?" Tyler said, his voice dripping with venom. "Well, let's see if you can handle the pressure." With that, Tyler lunged toward Lucas, shoving him hard. The other students gasped, but Lucas didn't stumble. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, staring at Tyler, his expression as calm as ever. Tyler stepped back, clearly surprised by Lucas's reaction. "What's wrong with you?" he snapped. "You're not scared." Lucas didn't say anything. He just slowly began to roll up the sleeves of his jacket, his eyes never leaving Tyler's. It was as if the moment had shifted, like everything had changed in the space of a heartbeat. Tyler's face twisted into a look of confusion, and for the first time, Ethan saw the slightest trace of fear in his eyes. And then, in the blink of an eye, Lucas did something unexpected. He stepped forward, and without a word, he removed his jacket. The simple act, so casual, seemed to freeze everyone in place. For a split second, the courtyard was completely silent. Underneath his jacket, Lucas wasn't just any regular kid. His muscles were toned, his posture strong. Ethan had never seen him without the oversized jacket, but now, seeing him like this, it was impossible to ignore how fit he was. He was no weakling, no pushover. In that moment, Lucas wasn't just a new kid who had come to the school. He was a force to be reckoned with. Tyler's smirk vanished. "Who are you?" Tyler asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lucas didn't answer. He just put his jacket down on a nearby bench and walked away, his shoulders straight, his head held high. The group of kids watched him go, their expressions mixed with confusion, admiration, and a hint of fear. As Lucas disappeared into the school building, the crowd stood still, unsure of what had just happened. The tension in the air was thick, and Tyler, the bully who had controlled everything, was left speechless. Ethan watched it all unfold, his heart still racing. The shift had happened. The power had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something stirring inside him. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew this. Tyler's reign had ended, and Lucas, the quiet, calm new kid, had just shown everyone why you should never underestimate silence. The days after Lucas's quiet confrontation with Tyler passed by quickly, but they left a lasting impact on everyone. The school, which had always seemed like a place ruled by the loudest voices and the strongest bullies, felt different. Ethan could feel it in the hallways, in the way the other students moved through the school. There was a shift, a subtle one, but undeniable. Tyler, the king of taunts, the one who had dominated every conversation with his loud, mocking laugh, was now strangely quiet. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he had seen Tyler without his usual cocky smirk. It was as if Lucas's simple act of standing up to him had chipped away at the foundation of the bully's power. But the transformation wasn't just in Tyler. It was in the school as a whole. Kids who had once laughed at the misfortunes of others now seemed to think twice before making jokes. Those who used to whisper behind others' backs now found themselves standing a little taller, unsure of how they had treated their classmates in the past. And Ethan found himself walking through the hallways with a little more confidence, a little more purpose, even though he didn't fully understand why. One afternoon during lunch, Ethan found himself sitting alone in the cafeteria, his usual spot away from the noise of the other students. He often ate by himself, the table farthest from the others, the clattering of trays and voices a distant echo in his ears. But today was different. There was a new energy in the air, a sense of possibility. He glanced around the room, his eyes scanning the usual groups of students. That's when he saw Lucas. Lucas was sitting at a table in the center of the cafeteria, surrounded by a group of students who had never bothered to speak to him before. They were laughing together, exchanging stories, and for the first time since Lucas had arrived, he wasn't alone. He was part of the group, accepted without hesitation. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but stare. It wasn't just that Lucas had made friends. It was how quickly everything had changed. Just days ago, he had been the target of bullying, just like Ethan had been. But now, Lucas was surrounded by others, confident and relaxed, like he had been part of the group all along. It wasn't long before one of the students, a girl with short brown hair, waved at Ethan. "Hey, Ethan, come join us," she called out, her voice cheerful. "We've got room at the table." Ethan froze. For a moment, he wondered if she had meant someone else. But no, she was looking right at him. He hesitated. He wasn't used to this. He was used to sitting by himself, keeping his distance from the other kids. It was safer that way, or so he thought. But there was something different about the invitation. The way they were all sitting together, laughing and enjoying each other's company. It was like a different world than the one he was used to. Slowly, cautiously, Ethan got up from his seat and made his way over to the table. The students smiled at him as he approached, and Lucas, who had been sitting in the center, nodded at him. "Hey, Ethan. Glad you could join us," he said, his voice steady, welcoming. There was no hesitation in his tone, no judgment, just a simple acknowledgement. Ethan sat down at the table, his stomach a little tight. He didn't know what to expect, but as the conversation flowed around him, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. These weren't the kids who had laughed at him. These weren't the ones who had ignored him. They were different. They were the ones who saw him, who recognized his worth without needing to prove anything. As the lunch period went on, Ethan found himself laughing along with the others, sharing stories, and even cracking a few jokes of his own. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the quiet kid in the background. He was part of the group, part of something bigger than himself. And it felt good, really good. And maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as scary as it seemed. But as much as Ethan was enjoying this new feeling, he couldn't help but notice Tyler, sitting at his usual spot at the back of the cafeteria. He was alone now, no longer surrounded by his usual group of friends. The other students seemed to be avoiding him, and even from across the room, Ethan could see the frustration building on Tyler's face. It was clear that the world had shifted under his feet, and he didn't like it. His once tight grip on the school, his ability to make people fear him, was slipping away. And for the first time, Tyler didn't have the power he was used to. It was gone. As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, the students stood up and began gathering their things. Ethan walked out of the cafeteria with the others, feeling lighter, more at ease than he ever had before. As they exited the building, Lucas caught up to him, walking side by side. "You good?" Lucas asked with a smile. "You seemed a little off earlier." Ethan nodded, smiling back. "Yeah, I think I'm just getting used to all this. It's a lot to take in." Lucas chuckled. "It can be, but you'll get there. You've got a lot more strength in you than you realize. You just have to find it." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He wasn't sure what Lucas meant, but he couldn't deny that there was truth in his words. He had always been afraid to speak up, afraid of standing out, of being noticed. But in that moment, walking beside Lucas, he felt a change inside him, a quiet confidence, a sense of peace, like he could finally breathe. For the first time in his life, Ethan didn't feel weak. He didn't feel like an outsider. He didn't feel small. He felt powerful in his own way. And maybe, just maybe, he had Lucas to thank for that. As they walked toward their next class, Ethan realized that something bigger than just standing up to bullies had happened here. It wasn't just about what Lucas had done to Tyler. It was about how Lucas had shown him, without even trying, that it was okay to be yourself. It was okay to be different, to stand your ground, and most importantly, to know your worth. The final bell of the day rang, and the students poured out of the school, their voices loud with excitement, ready to go home. But for Ethan, today felt different. There was a weightless quality to his step, something that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just the relief of surviving another school day. It was the feeling that he was finally stepping into a version of himself he hadn't known existed. He walked alongside Lucas, who had become a quiet but constant source of support. They weren't close friends just yet, but there was a growing understanding between them, a connection that needed no words. They shared a kind of silent acknowledgement that they had both changed, in ways big and small. As they approached the school gates, Ethan paused, looking out across the parking lot. Something caught his eye. A car parked near the entrance, sleek and black, far different from the usual rusting old vehicles that lined the lot. At first, he thought it was just another parent's car, but then he saw the driver. It was Tyler. Ethan frowned, unsure of what to make of it. Tyler was standing next to the car, his posture stiff, his eyes scanning the school grounds with a mix of annoyance and unease. The students who had once followed him like sheep seemed to avoid him now, leaving Tyler alone in the middle of the lot. "Hey, Lucas," Ethan said quietly. "What's going on with Tyler? Is he waiting for someone?" Lucas glanced over in the direction of the car and shrugged. "Not sure. I've been seeing him hanging around here more lately, but he doesn't really talk to anyone. I think he's still trying to figure things out." Ethan felt a strange pang in his chest, a mixture of empathy and something else, something that felt like the last remnants of fear. He had spent so long being afraid of Tyler, of the things he would say or do, that it was hard to shake the feeling that maybe things were still dangerous. But the more he looked at Tyler, standing there alone, the more he realized something had shifted. Tyler was no longer the untouchable figure he had once been. The power that had once made him untouchable had crumbled away, piece by piece, ever since Lucas had stood up to him. Without thinking, Ethan started to walk toward him. The curiosity burned inside him, urging him forward. He had questions about Tyler's behavior, about the way things had changed. Maybe, just maybe, Tyler could explain why everything felt so different now. Lucas, sensing Ethan's intent, caught up with him. "Are you sure you want to do this? He's not exactly the most approachable guy right now." Ethan nodded, his resolve firm. "I don't know what's going on with him, but maybe we should figure it out. Maybe he needs to hear that things have changed." Tyler noticed them walking toward him and immediately straightened up. His eyes flickered with surprise, but there was something else there, something softer, like the armor he had built around himself was beginning to crack. He didn't speak immediately, just stood there, shifting from foot to foot as though trying to find the right words. "You wanted to talk?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but steady. "You've been acting kind of different lately." Tyler seemed taken aback, as if no one had ever asked him that before. After a long pause, He sighed deeply, and his shoulders seemed to relax just a little. "I don't know what to say," he muttered, his voice quieter than usual. "I used to think I could control everything by making people fear me. But now it's like nobody cares anymore. They've stopped being afraid." Ethan could see it then, the cracks in Tyler's confidence. The tough exterior was slowly crumbling, and Tyler seemed to be facing the harsh reality of it all. There was no power left in bullying, no control in being feared. The world had shifted, and Tyler, for the first time, wasn't the one pulling the strings. Lucas stepped forward, his tone unexpectedly kind. "Maybe you've been going about it the wrong way. People don't need to be scared of you. They just need to see the real you, you know." Tyler looked at him, his eyes flickering with something that looked like uncertainty. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Lucas said, "if you let people see who you really are, without trying to intimidate them or put on a show, you might find that they actually want to be around you. You don't need to scare people to get respect. You need to earn it." The silence between them stretched out, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if Tyler was genuinely thinking about Lucas's words, turning them over in his mind, trying to make sense of it. He looked at the two boys standing in front of him, both offering him something he hadn't expected: understanding. Finally, Tyler nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll think about it." Ethan wasn't sure what to expect from Tyler after that conversation. But as he walked away, he realized that this moment had been just as important for him as it had been for Tyler. He had faced his fear, had stepped up when it mattered, and in the process, he had learned something he would never forget. True power doesn't come from intimidation or control. It comes from understanding, from standing up for what's right, and from being yourself, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. As the sun set behind the school, Ethan felt a sense of peace he had never known before. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from avoiding conflict or hiding from your problems. It was the kind of peace that came from knowing who you were, from standing tall in the face of adversity, and from understanding that, no matter how tough things got, you were never truly alone. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt ready to face whatever came next, because, in that moment, he understood the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, it only takes one person to change everything.